All right, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Allison DeWitt. I am the Director of Alumni Engagement here at the Kelley School of Business. We're so excited to have all of you joining us today. We're hoping all of you in our Kelley family and our IU family are staying healthy and just making the most of your time right now. That's what we wanted to do here at Kelley. We wanted to be able to provide some opportunities for connection and engagement for our entire Kelley family here in these next couple of weeks, and which is why we decided to launch some new webinars here in April, and we'll be bringing you hopefully a new webinar every week. Well, definitely a new webinar every week here in April. That's our goal, to be able to provide some content, some ways to engage and stay connected with Kelley to all of you and our family of Kelley's and IU alumni. So thank you so much for joining. A couple of quick housekeeping things I wanted to share with all of you before we jump into the actual webinar today. For those of you who have participated in a webinar with us in the past or a Kelley virtual gathering of any kind, you'll know that we are usually top notch. We're in a studio. We've got a full team of people supporting our video and audio. Like many of you, that's not the case for us now. We are all working from home at Kelley right now. So thank you for bearing with us, as this is our first webinar that we're hosting. Just the two of us, Amber and myself. My colleague Amber Richards is also on this webinar. If you do run into any technical issues or difficulties, please send us a chat in the chat function over there. Hopefully you can all access that at the bottom. If not, if you can't figure that out as well, feel free to send either of us an email. We'll be monitoring our emails too. Additional chat functionality. Austin, our presenter today, will be asking many of you to give some feedback. So please be prepared to provide some answers and in the chat function when he does that, as well as if you have any questions of Austin or of Kelley at all, feel free to share those in the chat as well. We will be using that and monitoring that throughout the entire webinar. I think that's all we have right now. All of the attendees will be muted, so you won't be able to physically talk. That's just to help us maintain the structure of everything going on today. But again, please feel free to use chat or Q&A. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and turn this over to Austin. Austin Bristow is a collegiate and TEDx speaker, focusing on the positive role that discipline plays in our lives. He regularly speaks on the idea of being designed for discipline, understanding that the decisions we make around our time, money, and relationships have an enormous impact on our sense of personal freedom. He graduated from Kelley in 2010 with majors in marketing and entrepreneurship and innovation. He is a husband and a father to 3 children under 4 and has worked from home for almost 10 years. So a lot of insights to be able to share with all of us today. On a fun note, he's a firm believer that cold brew is the best way to consume coffee, and he brews his own on a daily basis. So without further ado, give us a quick second here, and we will transition over to Austin.
Perfect. So y'all can hopefully see me. Can you hear me? I don't see my mute on. There we go. We're looking good. Excellent. Thank you, everybody, for coming. As Allison mentioned, my name is Austin Bristow, and what I wanted to do before we even get started or jump into anything is actually utilize that chat function and just get an idea for why you signed up for this webinar, what kind of challenges you're facing right now. If you would answer that, you can either do it to all panelists or all panelists and attendees, so everybody can kind of see the challenges that we're going through. My hope when I do workshops like this is always to start the conversation, seeing what people are facing. That way, as we go through things, I can hopefully answer some specific questions or issues with examples that I know I've gone through myself, because I've had plenty of issues to face. So if you want to take a second and throw in a reason for maybe why you jumped on, you know, you're size of your home or condo isn't conducive, or it's the first time you've ever had to work from home in your life, so you just don't know what to do or how to stay disciplined, that kind of stuff. Got it. Some tips and tricks. All right. Stay focused in the day. Got it. Because you got a bunch of stuff around the house to do. Absolutely. All right, we're flowing in now. Working from home for the first time. No desk space. Got it. Jen, you love cold brew too. Thank you so much. Glad to hear that. And trouble separating life from work in the same space. Absolutely. That can be a huge challenge. Cool. Well, thank you very much for sharing those things. Suffice it to say, based on even these quick responses, most people, myself included, don't necessarily have the setup that would be something like where we got here. This, if you were going home to this every day or from your office, odds are good you'd have this under control. I don't even have an office that looks like this, even though my everyday job is to work from home. I have a great desk setup, but more often than not, or more likely than not, you're like my coworker who shared this photo on LinkedIn last week, where he's in a 2-bedroom condo in Chicago, working off of a cardboard box to take phone calls, or moving out to the dining room if his son, is down for a nap or playing, or just needs some time to himself in his room. So there are certainly challenges that millions and millions of people are facing right now that they've never had to overcome before. So I'll share with you first a little background about me and how I got here to where I am, so you can kind of understand the bigger picture direction. There'll definitely be some tips and tricks, things like obviously get up, start your day like you normally would, put on real clothes instead of staying in your pajamas, those types of things. But the bigger picture will also revolve around kind of the mentality around making work from home work. So as a little bit of background, as Allison said, I am a Kelley grad, 2010. So love myself some Bloomington. I'm originally from Muncie, Indiana, if anybody's familiar with the state of Indiana. While at IU, I did ride Little 5. I was in Delta Sig within Kelley. So I don't know if you have any DSPs on the call, but if you are, welcome brothers to the call. Glad to have you guys here. Outside of getting to ride Little 5, my other big accomplishment, I think, was passing accounting A100 first semester freshman year. So I didn't have to do that class too many times like some of my friends did, but absolutely loved my experience in Bloomington. Since that time, I graduated, did a year-long internship, and found my current employer, which is how I got started in this work from home space. I moved from Indianapolis down to Houston, Texas. And with that, I didn't know anybody, but the one thing I knew was I didn't want to lose my job. So we'll get into how that sort of affected my mentality into working from home and making it be something that was very functional. And since that time, I've gone from field marketing into field sales, and I'm now an analyst for our company. So I deal with dashboards and spreadsheets like this every day using a program called Power BI. So that's sort of what my day-to-day looks like, and why I have an office set up that many people would probably really love the opportunity to have for the next 4 or 6 weeks, depending on how much longer we got to ride this thing out from home. So I do have a wife and 3 kids. This is a quick shot of them. They're a rowdy bunch, and they are here all day. They have been since our first child was born almost 4 years ago. So my experience with kids at home too is also something that I can relate to, if that's an issue that people are facing or trying to overcome, just to make that balance work. But to give you some thoughts then, or ideas or understanding around my sort of speaking side of things. So with that move to Houston, Texas, just to lay the foundation on where we're going with this whole conversation, is that I, again, was working from my apartment in Houston, which I loved because the internship I had was an hour commute each way. And having just graduated college, I thought that was a terrible waste of time because it was not what I was used to in school. But I started to set some really regimented expectations for myself. And that's just part of where our big picture topic right now is thinking about, like, what mentality do I need to have to make work from home work? There will certainly be tips and tricks, but having the right mentality and the right frame of mind over these next, 4, 6, however many weeks it is going to be really, really crucial to being successful. So the first rule I set for myself when I was working from home was that I had to be at my desk in my apartment or out in the car in the trade doing marketing stuff from 8 to noon. From noon to 1, I gave myself a lunch break. And then from 1 to 5, I had to be working again. And that was sort of the foundation for just understanding. Now, again, I was single, no kids, just moved to Houston by myself. So that was a different time. But that was the basis for it all. And at the same time, I was reading a book that talked about the idea that discipline creates freedom. And in that section that I read, it was really intriguing to me. And I started to think about, well, is this real? Is this legit? How do I apply this to my life? And the more I considered it, it passed the test for me. When you think about, again, working from home or even any job, being disciplined in your work, getting work done when it needs to be done, being disciplined in your finances or your health or whatever the case may be, that ends up creating the freedom you're looking for in accomplishing your goals and doing things that matter to you. So over the last probably 4 or 5 years, I've been kind of promoting this idea of being designed for discipline, as Allison mentioned, that if we can learn to use our time more effectively, manage our money more responsibly, and develop our relationships more intentionally, that's when we find the sense of freedom that lasts, that we're looking for. And right now, I can imagine for a lot of people, it feels very constricting to be stuck in your house, asked to stay home and not go anywhere, along with everybody else in your home, and you're starting to go a little stir crazy. So today we're going to talk about that time piece of these 3 elements. To get into that kind of first big picture mentality. Oh, sorry, there was a question. Somebody raised their hand. Jen? All right. We'll go, and if it pops up, we'll answer that question. Cool. Thank you. So the first kind of big picture thing to think about when the key to this, to me, which may be disappointing to some of you, is that making work from home work is going to take a lot of discipline, kind of from everybody in your house. And maybe that's an obvious statement, or maybe that's something that you hear the word discipline and you cringe a little bit because you feel like you don't have the self-control or the self-discipline or the structure needed to make this work. But I promise you that you can. It's, again, all about a mentality. So the first way that I kind of had the chance to share that within this platform of an idea was through a Charlotte TEDx talk a couple years ago. And the gist of the program boiled down to say that we have to consider, in order to be more disciplined, we have to think about the short-term sensation as opposed to the long-term implication, or along with the long-term implications of our actions. So when we think about this in terms of working from home, there can be short-term sensations. If you feel like you're not staying focused or productive, the short-term sensation of just kind of quitting and walking away is pretty good because it's less stressful. But the long-term implication of that is, potentially jeopardizing your job. The short-term sensation of, maybe going off on kids or spouses because things just seem too stressful, feels like it could solve the problem in the short term, but the long-term implication, is what kind of ramifications does it have on your family or your relationships. So when we think about doing things in a disciplined manner, understand that to make this work, there may be some short-term sensations that are uncomfortable or feel like it's difficult to do, like creating routines and setting new schedules and doing that stuff. But the long-term implication is going to be getting through these next 4 or 6 or however many weeks more smoothly. And truthfully, to me, I think one of the biggest benefits for people is this is a great chance to litmus test the idea of working from home. Because if companies start to offer this, you may consider this something you would want to do more often because of the freedom it gives you having to not commute or be at an office or do those types of things. So know that going through this short-term time could really set you up for some long-term benefits outside of that. The end of the TED Talk basically then summarized, and what we're going to talk through today is, we can bring this idea to life if we do a few things. The first is to kind of define and rank our big bucket priorities. And we'll go through an exercise, but right now, likely many people's priorities have completely changed from what they used to be because everything is different than what it used to be. So we'll talk through what that can look like from both a personal life standpoint as well as in your professional life, thinking about how do you manage your work and your career. After that, it's then really important to become conscious of your time and tracking your time. And we'll go through an example of what it means to track your time, as well as what the benefit is of that, and how you use that information to start to create the structure, the routine, and the discipline that you need to make this time at home work for everybody that's under your roof. And then lastly, a skill that a lot of people will probably have to start getting good at, or maybe even a little less so, depending on the situation, is saying no to things. There aren't a lot of opportunities to go out and do stuff and get distracted, but there's still plenty of stuff to take care of under our own roof that you still have to be selective with the stuff that you're focusing on. And from that, you then create those routines that are important to you. So I'll stop there for a quick second. I don't know if anybody has questions around that. I realize it's more informative than anything else, but just make sure that we're all on the same page with this, with those things. All right, cool. So discipline, what do we think about discipline? Because that's where we kind of got to start with that baseline since we're all on the same page. And I don't know if you can tell it in the video, I'm about 6'8", I weigh 285. I was a big football player in high school, not true, but I did have a famous football coach that some of you may recognize. He was a great guy, really motivational and inspirational. And one of my favorite quotes from this movie is really a pretty sarcastic remark he has to his assistant coaches as they start going to training camp over the summer. He hands them a manila envelope with their offensive playbook before they all get on the buses to go to training camp. And the assistant coaches are all saying, like, "Coach, this is pretty thin. What's up with this? It's 2 pages." And Denzel Washington responds, "I run 6 plays, split veer. It's like Novocaine, just give it time and it always works." And to me, it's a really simplistic kind of tongue-in-cheek answer, but it's also very much how I've started to think about the idea of discipline and understanding that discipline is a process. It's something that, again, over these next 4+ weeks, you're going to have to try this stuff again and again and again. It's going to be something that you're going to slowly make work. It's not going to be like we jump off this call and all of a sudden all of your problems are solved. This is going to hopefully be a lot of tips and ideas to get your mind thinking about how to smooth things out, especially as we head towards the weekend. Maybe you can use the weekend for some of this planning so that you go into next Monday with a really solid game plan that you're excited to start. So one thing I always share in my workshops as we go through this information are 3 keys to discipline, because people definitely at times feel like they don't have discipline. But 3 things that I have found over the last 9 years of living this work from home life are really, really essential to making this work. And one is self-awareness. If you're not willing to admit or understand your current situation and know, how are you using my time? What things are my conflicts? Why am I getting frustrated about these things? Or like, what is the real pain point here? Then it's going to be difficult to make the changes that you need. And a couple of our exercises revolve all around self-awareness. The next key to having greater discipline, in my opinion, is creating routines. I think a lot of times routines get a bad rap. We tend to think of routine as a 4-letter word, and really I think stereotypically only 2 groups of people that like routines in our lives. One is like parents with small kids, because when you have your toddlers on a routine, it makes things a little more manageable and a little more predictable. The other group of people that we think really like routines would be our parents that are in, assisted living facilities, so that they know which day they get to play bingo and which night they get to have their hair done, those types of things. Other than that, we tend to think of routines as being constricting and constraining. But truthfully, what we're going to talk about at the kind of the final step of this in creating routines is that routines allow us to amplify the things that matter most to us. So that's why we're going to focus on having them and creating them, even if for just short chunks and periods of time throughout your day. And then lastly, understand that in order to stay disciplined, you've got to forgive yourself, because you're never going to be perfect. If you go into this work from home scenario thinking, it's all going to be great and everything's going to be flawless and fluid, I will absolutely feel terrible for crushing your dreams, but that won't be the case. Even today, I was on a conference call with a project team that I'm on, and things basically melted downstairs in our house. So told everybody I'd be right back, turned my video off and my audio was muted, and went to help my wife for a few minutes, and then came back to jump in. And this is our everyday. This isn't just some special scenario because everybody's being required to stay home. So it's something that it's not always going to go perfect, but you've got to be willing to accept the imperfections with it and then kind of move past them. Questions on sort of 3 keys to discipline, anything about that, or realizing that this is going to be a big part of making the next month or so work? Also, as you can see, living in the South now in Charlotte, hardcore, I drink my water from mason jars. So I've adopted the local trends as much as I can since moving here. All right, perfect. Well, let's jump into our first exercise, so to speak. And this is where we're going to do an example, or I'll walk you through an example using kind of personal priorities, but understand that personal priorities for many people very well may have shifted in the last 2 weeks since being asked to stay home, and also to like not go anywhere with everybody else there. But at the same time, you can take this framework and apply it to things that you need to be doing in your daily job. So when we look at this in my TED Talk and in my general discussions, I always talk about the importance of understanding and defining what I call big bucket priorities. These are the things that, like, if you had a chance to focus on them or lean into them a little more, what would be the top things that you pick? And for everybody, these are going to be different. In this day and age, with what we have going on, it's even different than what you would have probably picked 3 weeks ago. So again, I'll walk you through an example that I usually do with my personal life, because we're talking about how to focus on the stuff that matters and, dedicating time to the right things. And then again, you can apply it to things that are specific to your work, projects that you need to get done or regular tasks that you have to complete. So if I were to take this, one thing you have to understand is, and take away as something if you're at home, is that there will not be time to do everything every day. And I realize people already know that, but as we again talk about the importance of self-awareness to this process, it has to be understood that you're only going to be able to do so much. And part of that, in my opinion, has to be accepted by employers. Like, your employees may not be giving you a 40 full hours each week because they have 3 or 4 kids at home who all need to be homeschooled, like somebody mentioned. And they also have a spouse who works. So how do you merge those, get all of that done, plus each spouse work 8 hours a day? It's probably not going to happen. So we'll talk a little bit in the routine section about the importance of communication and having honest dialogue too. And that could be with an employer or with other people in your house. But in this specific instance, when we talk about how do you determine your priorities and stuff that matters to you, to me, the best way to do it is always to compare things head to head. So what I would do is I would look at my health and I'm going to compare it to my marriage. And I'm going to say, okay, which of these is more important and how are they related to one another? If at the end of the day I had to pick one specific thing and go with that instead, what would it be? So for me, obviously, I think about my health is important, because if I don't take care of it, I'm no longer alive to be in a marriage. So there's that. And also my marriage is a thing that I committed to being, most dedicated to for the rest of my life on my wedding day. So as I think through all these different things, I would give my marriage a vote. I'm then going to go ahead and take my health and compare it to my children. Very similar scenario, but even, a month ago or so, our oldest got the flu. If I was more concerned with my health than him, I would have stiff-armed him and said, hey, sorry, Gus, you got to tough this one out on your own. But that's obviously not what I did. My children come before my health, and I ended up catching whatever he had, and it was not the most pleasant 2 days, but it was something that I knew was the right thing to do for my kid. So I would choose my kids over my health. Next is my faith for me, and I would say my faith dictates how I want to see the world, things I want to do, and would inform how I should be, taking care of myself. And then lastly would be my health and my career. And again, I love the work that I do. The business intelligence universe is great. The public speaking is awesome. But if at any point it's causing me to have serious anxiety or breakdowns, then it's not worth it. So I would have to choose my health over my career. So at that point, then I would move on to marriage and compare it to everything below that, and then children and faith. So in career, when I'm done with it, I end up with results that look like this. And when you, again, pick kind of those top things, because we have to realize there's only so many things we can focus on at one time, you get results and you have to say, like, all right, well, what does this mean? And for me, this obviously means I hate my job, right? No, that's not the goal. The goal here is to understand that just because I valued something else more important, it doesn't mean that my career is bad. It means that something else is better. So when you think about, okay, we've got kids schooling to get finished. I have an elderly parent that I have to take care of and keep isolated to stay safe. I have my work that I have to get done. Maybe somebody else in the house lost their job, so we have more money that we have to make to help make ends meet. There are all these kinds of things you've got to think about and weigh and figure out, okay, like, where do these fall on the hierarchy of needs for this season of life, and how do they interplay with one another? To some extent, it almost feels like a Tim Ferriss phrase where you're talking about the minimum effective dose. Like, what can I do on each of these to make sure that the most important parts of it are getting done? And that's where you're going to start to get some clarity to understand, what do I need to be disciplined in? What do I need to be focusing on? But then also from this, you start to extrapolate, okay, if, for me, if the example we'll go through is like my faith. If my faith is most important to me, or if my health is most important to me, what does that mean? How do I bring that to life? So if getting your kids' schoolwork done and having to do that is what's most important to you, then you have to think about, all right, what actions could I take to make that happen and bring that to life? If it's my health, does that mean I need to cut out sugar? Does that mean I need to go for a walk? Does that mean I need to drink more water? Like, this is where the autonomy comes in for each of us as individuals to pick, how do I make that thing happen? How do I bring that priority to life on my own? Because I don't need to be comparing the way that I'm doing it to the way that somebody else is doing it on Instagram or whatever social media channel you like to follow. So that's kind of the general idea for creating these big bucket priorities and knowing what to focus on. Esther, thank you for the comment. Are there any questions? We'll stop there to kind of wrap up this slide and move on to the next point after that. But are there any questions you guys have about, this kind of ranking process, whether it's specific to your situation or just a general thought as to how the whole thing works? I need some doctor's office hold music for this part of the day. Cool. Thank you very much. All right. I will take that as we're good to go, but we'll stop again soon to check for more questions. So the next thing we need to know, we now know, all right, our big bucket priorities, here's what's important to me, and this is what I am saying is important to me. But as we talk about being self-aware, the big thing we have to figure out now is, do my words that I have defined as important to me actually match up the actions with what I'm doing? And that's where tracking our time comes into play. So this is something that even I do on a more regular basis now, just because things at work have gotten a little crazy and I'm not able to complete as many requests as I used to. So just to make sure that I'm being honest with people and also able to report back to my manager what my workload is like, I've been tracking my time more regularly during the day. But this can take form in a couple of different ways. It could be very informal with just a piece of paper and a pen. And the recommendation that I kind of first saw and has always worked for me is to look back for the past 30 minutes and check out what I've been doing. How have I been spending my time? You could do it in a spreadsheet if you want. During the workday, I actually go through and I will backfill my calendar. If there was free time that I started working on a project, or if I had something blocked to work on a work project, but my boss called me and that ended up being a 45-minute phone call that took up, almost an hour of my time, I backfill that in my calendar so that I know, like, all right, well, if these things got missed, why? Oh, it's because I was on these unexpected phone calls, or, something else happened, or we were low on supplies, and you kind of got to check the store every few days to see if you can get that important thing back in your house. So you have to run out when hopefully crowds are a little bit, smaller right now, whatever the case may be. So when you track your time, this would be one way to do like your entire day. We'll also talk to, you could do it digitally with your phone. Maybe your phone is your big crutch right now. And obviously the technology is really important, but you could use something like just your general app tracking. I know iPhones, I think, have that to monitor your usage every day, but there are also apps that I have an Android, and it's called Quality Time. It goes through and I can actually set brackets of time where it locks me out of every app except for X, Y, and Z. So I can tell it from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. I only want to be allowed to use the phone function, the texting function, and Pandora. And if I want to bust out of that and I want to go check ESPN or USA Today or something else, even do a Google search, I have to basically sit in a penalty box where it locks my phone for whatever I set it for, 30 seconds, or I could set it for 2 minutes. So at that point, it basically kills your need or your want to go do that distracting thing, and I put my phone back down. And then at the end of the day, it tells me how often I used each app, how many times I unlocked the phone, how much time I spent on each app, etc., whether it was my phone or texting, whatever the case may be. So it's really informative. But then on this, you'll see this is kind of a typical day for me. Wake up in the morning. This is my kind of devotional time, which we'll talk about scheduling those priorities at certain parts of the day. And, then from 6:30 to 7 is usually when I work on speaking stuff, trying to reach out to people, see if they're interested in bringing in a speaker like me. I manage breakfast for our 2 older kids in the morning. And then, I'll get myself dressed, ready, teeth brushed, clothes on, that kind of stuff, check some email. And on this particular day, this is how I spent my day. I try to be in bed around 10 o'clock because waking up around 5:30 requires for me a solid 7 hours of sleep. Otherwise, I don't do it very well. So you're tracking your time should, hopefully last for like 1 week. This isn't something that I would recommend doing all day, every day, because it's not realistic. But this is something that will start to give you an idea of all right, how am I using my time? How often am I getting interrupted by, X, Y, and Z? And once you know that, then you can start to create routines that allow you to minimize those distractions potentially, and also increase the level of communication between other people in your home. So once you know how to track your time, it also then you become a little more conscious of distractions that you're doing. For me, when I first started doing this, I was on a different sales platform, and it was through Coca-Cola, and it took forever for their stuff to load. So I would open up a browser and start scrolling Facebook. And at the beginning, I was really conscious of like, all right, I'll click back over. Nope, still hasn't loaded. All right, I'll scroll for a couple more seconds and check. Well, eventually, as a few days or weeks went by, I was just sitting on Facebook scrolling, and I forgot that the program would have logged in. So I started putting notes or making a list on my computer that I call now a to-don't list. We all have to-do lists, but once we start tracking our time and realizing how we're doing it, you can start to create a to-don't list. And it sounds cheesy or corny or whatever, but it's something that for me was a very visible reminder of like, this is how I should not be spending my day, at least not during the workday. If I would just finish this, sales analysis, I could be done at 4:30 or 4:15 instead of 5, and then I could go do whatever I wanted anyway and focus on those things that matter to me. So the to-don't list can be really informative to call out those habits that maybe you have. So you start to minimize those, especially in this time when everybody's hours in the day are so compressed, because you have so many more distractions coming in at you to get that same probably amount of workload finished. So that's kind of the idea of time tracking. Are there any questions around, tracking your time, creating to-don't lists, so to speak, or how those things all relate to each other? All right. So the app, thank you, Maggie, for the question. The name of the app that I use is called Quality Time. I'll actually try to pull it up and show you what the graphic looks like so you can see it, or what the logo looks like. Yeah, so this is, I don't know if this is going to work or not, but we'll try it. So how's my phone look? Yeah, so it shows you today. You can scroll down from the top, and it gives me my daily usage so far is at 20 minutes, and it breaks it down by app. And then it also gives me my weekly usage. And then you can see like messaging and what Google Photos, LinkedIn, those types of things is how it quantifies it. And then it even goes to like a weekly frequency. I'm not going to show you those numbers because that's too high and embarrassing. And then like the number of times that I unlock my phone. So I can't get the logo to show up to have it be like the home screen, but it's basically a queue. Let me search for it one more time. There it is. Quality Time, that one right there. And there are other ones. I can't think of the names of the ones for iPhones right now off the top of my head, but there are certainly, and I can even, I don't know, Allison, if you have a distribution list you can send out to people, I can follow up with some notes on resources like that people could utilize for that stuff once I put them all together. Any other questions on time tracking? All right, cool. So now we're going to get into the foundational idea, or probably the most important part of making this kind of work from home stuff work, and that is the idea of creating routines. And routines, again, the goal of them is to help amplify the things that matter most to us, not to create a feeling of constraint or being held back by a repetitive process. And hopefully you'll see once I show you the example of my morning routine, how it really can help us focus on things we care about and then start to feel a little more fulfilled and a little less stressed by the fact that, maybe we aren't making headway in something that we're trying to pursue. So for winning routines or for building routines, there are a few things I think you can use for winning tactics. The first is to start small. Understand that, I don't know if you're watching this alone, watching it with your spouse or whoever else is in your house, so you guys can collaborate on this stuff together. Like when you walk away from this, my thought is, maybe it'd be a chance for you to turn to the people in your house and be like, hey, look, this guy said on the thing, we need to do X, Y, and Z. But really and truly, it needs to start with just like open communication. And truthfully, starting small is the best way to do it. I don't think walking away from this and saying, all right, we're going to overhaul the entire day and plan out, all 15 hours that we're awake is going to be realistic. If you start with routines that are small, and we'll get into a couple of examples, I think it's going to help a lot to set the precedent for everybody in your house as to what expectations are. And once people are on board with the same expectations, that's where you start to get the momentum that you want to see, to have everybody moving forward on the same page and feel like things are a little more under control. Kind of like, again, millennial parents with their toddler children who love to have routines set up. So the next thing there is to communicate your goal. Whatever the goal is for your routine, you've got to let people know about it. It's not fair to other people in your house if you have an expectation of them, but you haven't told them about it. If your thought is, well, I'm going to have this routine and these people are all going to do X, Y, and Z to obey that routine, but you don't tell them, it's going to blow up in your face and create more stress and more anxiety than you could probably imagine. So again, if there's somebody else in your house that you're going to be going through this with, like an adult, or even older kids who can understand, the concept of having to have expectations throughout the day, it's great to sit down and talk about, like, here's how I think we need to try to structure this next month, because April 30th right now feels like it's a really long way away for some people. So the communication is absolutely key. Number 3 is to make your own rules. You maybe hearing me talk have some expectation of your own that you think would be great, or you're seeing other people post stuff on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram or whatever it is. And you're potentially, I think one of the pitfalls we fall into is looking at that as like, that is the way that it has to be if I'm going to be successful. The example I use in my regular workshop is, somebody who posts all the time that they're at the gym for 2 hours every night because they're a bodybuilder. And you feel like if you only do a 20-minute cardio video on, YouTube, that it doesn't really count as an exercise. It doesn't really count as working out. But the truth is, it does, because it's you working out. It's not that person who wants to be at the gym for 2 hours. When I look at my day, I don't want to spend 2 hours at the gym every day to feel like I'm healthy. I want to go for a 3-mile run around my neighborhood and then call it a day. And that for me is good enough. So make your own rules as you start to think about, what are these routines going to be, and how is it I'm trying to quantify success? Don't hold your standard to somebody else's. Make it work for your own living situation, because every house right now is going through something totally different. That's got to be important for you, again, to have as a sense of self-awareness. The 4th point, we've got 5 of them to go through, is to share your progress. It doesn't have to be like let me post this everywhere on social media if that's not your thing, but sharing your progress is really good for getting support, and also potentially having people kind of poke you and prod you to keep moving. This could be, a close friend or a family member that you or a coworker, whatever it is, your manager, who you want them to know, like, here are the things I'm trying to do. And, I would love it if you kind of checked in for me or with me every once in a while to see how it's going. I use this from a speaking perspective, where I send out a newsletter. When I first got started in speaking stuff, I emailed a bunch of family and friends and said, hey, I'm trying to do this thing. I think it's pretty fun. I'd love to share progress on how I'm doing. So I set up the newsletter, got people's emails through MailChimp, and then I didn't send any progress for probably 6 months on anything that I was doing. And that was because I had gotten sidetracked with work and wasn't doing anything and wasn't focusing on it. So I'm at a party for my family, and my uncle comes over. He's like, hey, thanks for all the updates on your speaking stuff. It's been really interesting to read. And it was just like me wanting to shrink down into the corner, because I had hyped this whole thing and didn't do anything with it, even though I said it was important to me. But having him say that was a kind of a kick in the pants that I needed to keep working on stuff. So find those people who, truly love you, have your best intention at heart, and share what it is you're trying to accomplish with them so they can help you stay on track. Because doing everything on your own feels like a lot of a burden sometimes. And then lastly, I would say reassess. It's a little tough, because as you look to make routines, you've got to give them some time to play out, but we still have at least 4 weeks of this to go. So at some point, maybe it's at the 2-week point, or, you can look at it and say, okay, X, Y, and Z is not working. A and B are good. Let's keep that up. And now we're going to make some adjustments to try and smooth this whole thing out. So don't be afraid to change your routine. One of the things, or adjust it, I should say, tweak it, make a pivot, whatever word we want to use. Routines don't have to be something that are set in cement or in stone for the rest of eternity, because that's what creates burnout and a feeling of being constrained. Understanding that routines are meant to help you accomplish the things that matter to you is what allows you to realize, like, oh, I can drop that one, I can change that one, or adjust it just a little bit because I actually want to be focusing on this different aspect of, my health or my finances or whatever the case may be, instead of that one task that I was doing. So I'll stop there again to pause before sharing one of my routines, and we'll talk about kind of creating blocks for them. Are there any questions that you guys have about building routines this way? Cool. Okay. So last couple of pieces. This one is, this is literally how I like to manage my morning routine. This is my alarm system, basically, on my phone. I use my alarm on my clock to make sure that for an hour and a half every day, I have or really, I guess it's 2.5 hours. I have that chunk of time to do what's important to me. Oh, got it. Here we go. I had a question. How long do you stick with a routine before scrapping it? I think it's a really great point, or great question. So one of the fallacies we have about routines, there's an awesome book, by the way, I would recommend as a resource. It's called Atomic Habits by James Clear. Here, I'll get it real fast. Hang on. Atomic Habits by James Clear. I love this book. Like, one of the best reads I had last year. But one of the points he talks about or makes that I thought was really interesting is that we have this preconceived notion that a routine is about, well, I have to do this for 21 days for it to stick. And in reality, I don't think that's true. I think a routine will show you, if your routine will prove its value the more often you try to implement it. So really, a habit comes from doing something many times. If you are trying to not check your notifications as much during the day, like if you want to tell yourself, you know what, every time my phone dings, I don't need to look at it. I can stay focused on what I'm doing. If you're able to deny that, that pull to look at your phone 30 times the first day you do it, and you do that 30 times every day for a week, you just created, like you practiced an action 210 times in 1 week. It may not take you 21 days to make that a habit. You could very well have established that habit in 1 week because you were able to practice the self-control and the self-discipline over 200 times in 1 week. So when you look at how long do you stick with a routine, I think it has to be how many times did you try to put that routine in place. So I might pause to answer this for a second before we look at mine, because I think in the way I'm thinking about this for everybody else working from home is that there can be an instance where you're going to be able to put the same routine in place multiple times throughout the day. The example that I can kind of think of that might work for people, especially if you're juggling, multiple kids doing school, is it may be a scenario where you have to tell your kids, like, you know what, for the next 60 minutes or 90 minutes, kind of pick a time window, kids, I have to go work and mom is going to be the one who's here with you. I need you to give me that 90 minutes and then we're going to switch and mom's going to do that. And then I'm going to go work and then she's going to go work, and you create like a revolving door of this. Well, in that instance, you're practicing that 90-minute routine multiple times during the day, and your kids are starting to understand, like, oh, this is our new norm. We're doing things in 90-minute windows. So you would hopefully be able to try that routine multiple times to see if it has the impact that you want. From there, I think it's probably a personal gut. I'd stick with it for at least a week. I think for me, with our kids anyway, because kids are all very different, they start to get things after a week or so of trying something new, as long as we continually reinforce it in a positive way. Like, look how fun this is that, the light turns green for us to come get you from your room, or whatever the case may be. So the more you can sell it in a positive light and stick to it on a regular basis so everybody knows what's going on, that will give you the chance to gauge it. So I would say at least stick with it for a week before making any changes. Hopefully you don't have to completely scrap it. You can more make an adjustment to it. I don't know, does that help to the person who asked that? All right, cool. And if there's follow-up questions afterwards, feel free to shoot me a note or a message too. We can continue talking about it. But as an example, again, of sort of a routine that I do, this is something that I've done now for probably 4 years or close to 4 years. The exclusions or exceptions would be when we had newborns in the house. There was no routine then. It was simply being beholden to the wants of a 2-week-old child. But this is something for me that I set up when I looked at my time as how I could be most effective. And I know a lot of people look at stuff and maybe now you're thinking like, I need to exercise. I need to get out. I need to have time to talk with friends. I haven't seen my best friend, in 2 weeks, whatever the case may be. When you look at your time tracking, try to find the gaps of time where you can do things that matter to you, kind of on those priorities. Because in all of this, yes, your work is important, your kids' school is important, so is your mental health and your physical health. So when I looked at my day, I understood that waking up at 5:30 was a good thing for me because my wife doesn't want to talk to me at 5:30 in the morning. My kids, thank heavens, actually sleep well, so they don't need me at 5:30 in the morning unless they've had a bad dream or something crazy happened. So I could get up at 5:30 and do what I wanted for me to focus on things that mattered to me. And the short-term sensation of starting to wake up at 5:30 in the morning was brutal. The transition to that was something I did not enjoy. But I quickly began to see I was using that time originally to write blog content, to learn how to use a WordPress site, to start creating my ideas and thoughts around speaking, and to spend time in prayer. My PB&J is not consuming copious amounts of children's favorite food. It's my prayer Bible and journal time. So this is where when you look at your chunks of time during the day, you then go back to your priorities and say, okay, again, if my health is important to me, do I want to drink more water? Do I want to exercise? Do I want to change the way that I eat? For me, my faith was important to me. So it's like, all right, well, do I want to go to church more? Do I want to read the Bible more? Do I want to read devotionals? Do I want to do X, Y, and Z? Like, you have to decide how you want to bring that to life. And then you plug that activity into the time frame that you have available. So I always try to dedicate at least a 30-minute window. I feel like if I can do something consistently for 30 minutes a day, that's when I'm going to start to see momentum and progress. And again, that 30 minutes a day it's how I built my website. It's how I learned to use use WordPress, to write my speeches, to do all this different stuff was in, 30-minute chunks during the week. And the short-term sensation, again, feels like it's not great, but the long-term implication is I now have, an opportunity to speak to college students and, alumni from Kelley across the country because I spent that time over those years doing all of those things. So from there, I just have my alarms go off and that tells me the next thing to do. And this is another situation where you've got to be a little bit disciplined and kind of become a slave to your alarm. And I bring this up because it can be easy to not want to do that. But as an example, if you set this routine up with your family and you feel like you're going to stick to it, I promise you the first time you get lax and let it go, it throws off the rest of your day. If I am doing speaking stuff and I'm feeling good and it's, 7 o'clock and I'm like, oh, I'll just work for, 5 or 10 more minutes. Well, then I don't get downstairs and I don't prep breakfast soon enough for my kids. And then we get downstairs and it's chaos. And then I don't get upstairs to start working at 8 o'clock. It's more like 8:30 or later because things just like exponentially exploded because I wasn't strict to my schedule. But when I just say like, oh, you know what? I had 30 minutes. I had my 30 minutes to make a difference today. I have to start to find satisfaction in that. And then I move on to the next thing. So that's the gist of kind of how I build into a daily routine. Are there questions on that? Because we're going to basically wrap up here in the next few minutes. Are you guys kind of able to see if you take this framework and structure? And I think too about what kind of routines can you create for your kids, just as some things that we do to have children in the house. Ours, again, are much younger. We have a not quite 4-year-old, 2-year-old, and 4-month-old. Is that, we have signals and times that we expect. For me, it's 8 o'clock, my alarm goes off, and my kids know that means it's time for dad to go to work. They're also younger, so we have a baby gate at the bottom of our stairs, which creates a barrier for me. So that's like signals to them that they understand. I would presume your children, most of them, if you have them, and that's kind of your challenge, is creating space from them, is understanding, like they know the concept of you going to work, like they get that. So the point is just setting it up in a new frame of mind. One of the challenges I'm sure a lot of people face is that you would love to have a secluded space, which may not be possible depending on your living situation. So I think the more important thing to focus on outside of seclusion is just a dedicated space. If it's a corner of the table, like maybe you tape it off with painter's tape and say like, this is mom and dad's workspace. Their computers are here. You don't put your drinks here. You don't put your food here. And then at the end of the day, pull the tape up and it's the family table again. But maybe put tape down at the beginning of the day and say like, this is desk and office space so that we can keep doing our work. And it seems foreign at first. They may not listen well at first, but having that patience to stick with it in the short term when they're being disobedient or not listening really will, in my experience, turn out to be something where the kids are willing to understand like, oh shoot, sorry mom, dad, like I know that was your workspace, let me get that out of here for you. So they can start to respect that and understand what it's like. And maybe even for them, let them have their own dedicated play space that they get to have, something that's similar, because if you have multiple kids and they're all on top of each other, you need to maybe tape out the same thing on their floor. So they have, if they go here, this is their quiet space. Nobody else can touch it or mess with them during the day. So they know that they can have a little solitude or private time themselves. We also use things like light signals. We have one of those light to wake things. So if you have, some sort of way where you have your alarm go off on your phone or have the flashlight function flash when the alarm is up, that can be a signal to kids that they're ready to move on to the next thing. You can use visuals if you are able to close yourself into a room. Somebody suggested on one of my LinkedIn posts, if you have small children, you could even make like a stoplight, a red, green, and yellow light. There was another guy I saw who, when he works in his office, he puts an orange cone outside of his door if he's in like a really deep thinking space. So come up with some signal that lets the people in your house know, like, unless somebody's bleeding or dying or whatever, like I just need a little time. It's only going to be 60 minutes or 90 minutes, but I need that time. And then you can come in and interrupt me if I'm just writing emails or working on a spreadsheet, whatever the case may be. So we got a question. What do you do when fires come up that throw off your routine? That's part of where the forgiveness comes in for me. Depending on what the routine, like, so again, with my morning routine, it could be our 4-month-old just like isn't having it. And I know he's not hungry because of his feeding schedule, but he just needs to be held. And since my wife is the one managing the feeding schedule, I'm going to take time then to pick him up and hold him and make sure that he stays asleep. So in that instance, if I'm walking around with a 4-month-old, I can't be at my computer working on stuff. So I kind of sacrifice that morning time, knowing that, again, for me, my kids are the bigger priority and my marriage is the bigger priority. So for that one day, maybe it's a small, chunk where the routine gets thrown off because our infant is going through a season or a phase. But there has to be that instance where you understand, like, okay, I have to first let this go, not stress out about it, because that's not what anybody needs in their houses right now, and kind of let this routine end. And then we're going to reset the next time we get a chance. If that, I think that came through the Q&A, but if that helps, please let me know. I know Allison forwarded it to me. I got a couple other questions here. Let's work on a scenario. I think influencing teammates is, again, like this was from Rohit. I don't know if you're a manager or, if it's just your teammates who are your peers, maybe even telling them you shared with them, you saw this stuff and you're really interested in trying it, and, share a little bit with them how it impacted you, and say, like, hey, what if I know we're all busy, but if we can really carve out, an hour of time to dedicate to this thing that we need to do, this like deadline has to happen, find some way to make it happen, then influencing your team would kind of be sharing these pieces with them. I think anything you can do right now to encourage people in a positive way, they're going to take those opportunities. The stuff I'm sharing on LinkedIn, I have coworkers tell me in conversations now, like, thanks for this stuff. Like, I need to read more of your posts and do more stuff because I haven't worked from home like this and I don't know what I'm doing. So anytime you come across as like, hey, here's a suggestion, if they talk about struggling with it, then that can be an opportunity for you to sort of influence it and hopefully guide people along that same route. Suggestions and setting routines in an environment where you have a boss and direct reports that are now all working remotely with their own family situations, etc. I think the routines, like, that's where you have to figure out, thanks for the question, Mark, what's important to you. So this is where you're talking up, and like up to your supervisor and down to your direct reports, and first figuring out like what's important, like what for us as a team of employees matters. For me, I think about it as managing up. There are multiple instances, especially as an analyst. All people care about right now are numbers. My manager's coming to me with lots of requests, and it's been that way. I mean, it's our usual business role. So there are many times where I go to him and I say like, I can do that, but what's more important, this thing you just wanted or the 3 other things you asked me for? And kind of force that ask on them so that you can start to get in the routine of giving them the most important things, because things are going to be so crazy right now. And also communicating, if you have somebody else at home that you need to be switching work and family time with, put that in your calendar on work so people know that you're blocked off or you're open. And then also sync calendars with your spouse or whoever else is in the house. So if you have a call that's important, make sure that that call with, leadership team shows up on their phone too. So they know like, oh yeah, they're in a call right now. I need to keep the kids either like more quiet or away, or give them that 30-minute time. So that's kind of the hard part, is people are going to have different priorities. So the more you can communicate openly with them and say, what if we all try to do X and commit to this time every day for, 90 minutes. I'm going to work with my family to have that time. If you guys can do that, does that free up some space to get our stuff done? Last question, I think, from Emily. What do you do on days when you don't feel like doing your normal routine or parts of it? How do you mentally get yourself back on track? Thank you, Emily. Excellent question. That is where it's, again, for me, and part of it is understanding what motivates you. For me, the reason I have my routines is because I have things that I want to pursue. Like I'm passionate about this idea of sharing this message. I want to have, develop my faith, because that's something that I've deemed important for me. So it's, when I have fallen off my routine or I don't want to do it, I have to kick myself in, gear by saying like, wait, this is important to me. If I'm going to say it's important to me, I need to go do it, and use that as the motivation. So mentally, it's just understanding the long-term implications. Like think about like, all right, if I don't do this now, like it's easy to say I won't do it today. But the truth is, even when you have bad workouts, if you're training for a race or you're a professional athlete, whatever, they have bad workouts that they get through because they know that the next workout is going to be stronger. And that's what's going to build the routine, and you're going to start to see those results. So part of it is really just understanding and thinking back on like, I did this last time and this benefit came from it. I need to just make myself do it. Like put your shoes on, put your running clothes on and walk outside, and then decide that you don't want to go run. Odds are good, once you've done that, you're going to just go for the run. If you don't want to sit down and do whatever spreadsheet you have to do, like open your computer, get at your desk, open Excel, and then tell yourself like, all right, I'm going to walk away, because odds are good, once you start those first little steps, you're just going to let it keep going. Last thing I'll say, okay, cool. Last thing I'll say, just to wrap up, I know we're at time, is understanding that this is a sprint. This is a very, very weird season for all of us. And one of my favorite concepts from a guy named John Acuff is having seasons of hustle. So one thing that my wife and I did, she's a hand letterer. She's been doing this for years, and a few years ago, we found out about an event called the National Stationery Show. Most people spend at least 6 months, building their booth, getting their promo materials ready, getting their products all made. And we found out about this expo in New York with thousands of buyers from across the country 6 weeks before it was supposed to happen. So this is, again, before we had kids. We decided like, forget it, we're just going to do it. We're going to make it happen. And in 6 weeks, we made this booth come to life with all of these new products. We had buyers walk in and like, we've never seen you here before, but this can't be your first time because of the way that our booth looked. So this to me was an example of a season of hustle. And that's what a lot of us are in, or a lot of you are going to be in right now. It's going to be a very weird season, but I promise if you put in the time to do these things, to have that open communication, to try new routines and new ideas, you're going to come out of it hopefully with some result that you can look back on and be like, holy smokes, like we made that work and it was really good. And again, like we mentioned in the beginning, maybe you'll get the opportunity to work from home more often after this all clears up, and you'll have a really good foundation and understanding of like, yep, I could totally make that work, especially if, my kids aren't home because they're all back at school. It would be even more smooth. So think about how you can make this amplify and bring to life more great things for you, knowing that it is a very difficult season, understandably, but you can make some really cool stuff happen when it's all finished. That's all I've got for today. I appreciate all of your time. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you have more questions. Austin Bristow, you'll be able to find me, but I want to give it back to Allison because she wanted to share a couple more points here before we wrap up.
Thank you so much, Austin. Starting my video back up here. Thank you all for joining us today. I hope you grabbed some new ideas or tips or tricks for Austin. I know I picked up a couple of great things, so thank you so much. I just want to let you all know really quickly, share my screen. Austin, can you unshare yours?
Yes, I can.
Just to share with you guys all quickly, so you can see what else is coming up in our webinars these next couple of weeks. So like I mentioned, we are going to try and we are going to have webinars every week in April and hopefully continuing into May and June if we feel like people are interested and we have some good things. So the one next week, April 7th, that registration link is live. Registration should be live for April 6th. April 7th is live, excuse me. April 16th will be live any minute. We also have a bunch of career and professional development resources on our website that we'd love for you to check out. And finally, if you have any follow-up questions or feedback, things that we can pass along to Austin or things that we can just think about as we continue to host these webinars, please feel free to email either myself or Amber. We'd love to hear from you and look forward to continuing to host these in the next few weeks to come. Thank you all so much, and we'll stick around maybe for a quick second in case anyone has any chat questions, but other than that, have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. I'll let you handle those questions. I think they're more for you, Allison.